Well, my wife told me to break a leg, and I took her seriously, as everyone should all the time. Hi, everyone. I have no idea why I agreed to do this. This is my second public presentation. Sure, the first one was just fine if you ignore the shaking hands, the intense use of filler words, the 25-minute-long run-on sentence. It was fine. I got a lot of great feedback after that event. Things like, you need to talk slower. Well, I'm sorry, this is my speech. Y'all need to listen faster. But I'm thankful to be here today. On this stage, finally able to flex my rebellious muscles. Let me explain. Both my parents taught me that any measure of fame was a bad thing. My dad would say that I would never have to worry about Big Brother tapping my phone or listening to my Alexa as long as I remained completely boring and out of the public eye. He also said the problem of fame is that once you have it, you're going to want to keep it. And in order to keep it, you kind of got to do what people want you to do. My mom had a very different take on fame and glory. She's a deeply religious person. And she believes that all glory is meant for God alone, and that humanity isn't strong enough to carry the weight of glory. And she proceeds to talk about actor after actor who are seemingly weighed down or even crushed by their fame. But here I am, gray hair, dad bod. I'm one of the largest platforms in our modern world for sharing ideas that impact change. In preparation for this speech, they told me to identify my target audience. Well, that's easy. My target audience is the millions of people out there just like me who could never see themselves on this stage. People with a lifetime worth of lessons that they have learned, but they don't have a platform to share it. To this target audience, I would like to introduce a term: social reluctancy. It's not a term you're going to find in Webster's yet, but I like to define it as an individual who sees no direct or peripheral benefit to being popular or famous. And that's me. I own a small business. One of my employees, they like to call me the small business pastor. That's not a religious description. I seem completely content just watching and caring for my own little flock. And it fits. I have my family, I have a few employees, I have a couple of weekly commitments, and I'm completely satisfied in that life. So why am I here? Well, today I'd like to describe why I think social reluctancy is actually a bad thing. There's this man in my life. We'll call him Jim, because that's his name. Jim has been a long-term advocate of mine. For years, Jim has been telling me that my strategies around hiring and retaining millennial and Gen Z employees needs to be shared with a larger audience. I largely ignore Jim. But there's this phenomenon that happens in marriages. Not my marriage, of course, but marriages. An individual will tell their spouse or their teenage kid for years that they need to worry less or they need to apply for that promotion. And you know what? They never listen until that one random day. They come home all excited because a completely random person said the exact same thing. And suddenly, it's revolutionary for their life. Well, that moment happened for me on a podcast that Jim effectively forced me into. The podcast guest asked a question of me during the event, and I'd like to ask this question of all of the social reluctance out there. She said, John, clearly you have the tools to help struggling business owners find success. But you don't have a platform for sharing those ideas. Do you know how selfish that is? If you could help one business owner navigate their way through a crisis into a successful business future, wouldn't it make it worth breaking outside of this comfort bubble you're currently living in? Whoa. Revolutionary. So I quickly ran back to, well, I didn't run, dad bod, but I went back to Jim and I was like, hey, Jim, guess what? And Jim stared at me like, duh. So here I am today. And I'd like to share something I've learned in my own process of self-discovery in the last year. You see, I've learned that our modern culture has misappropriated a term, the term influencer. See, oftentimes today, there's a big difference between being an influencer and influence itself. To me, the measure of success of an influencer is numerical in value. It's how many likes or clicks do they have, how many subscribers are on their feed. That's what they care about. See, the measure of success of influence isn't the definition of what's being spoken, but instead, how deeply it impacts their audience. Sometimes those two things can go hand in hand. Popular influencers can create significant change in their audience, but I'm sorry. If you're doing videos about how well you play video games or practical jokes, I don't consider that influence. I mean, I love a trick shot video as much as the next guy, but that's just entertainment to me. What real influence looks like to me is when I was 10 years old. A man named Randy, my gymnastics coach, convinced me I could do things I never dreamed were possible. At 16 years old, a restaurant manager named Bill taught me how to read a P&L statement and what effective leadership looked like. At 21 years old, a small business owner named Ken allowed me to spread my wings and run a small division of his business. These people changed my life in ways that popular influencers never have. Let me define this a different way. I told you earlier about Jim. I called him a long-term advocate. The guest in that podcast would have been considered an immediate advocate. And if I'm trying to understand the difference between influencer and influence, a quick litmus test to me is, what are they advocating for? If they're advocating for the growth of their platform, if they're advocating for their popularity or thinly veiled sales tactics, that person is just an influencer. But if they're advocating for the well-being, growth, and change of their audience, then I would say that person carries influence. So when I started our conversation today, I asked why a social reluctant like me would be willing to get on the stage. And I guess the right answer is I would like to be a person of significant influence. But there's a deeper and more vulnerable reason that I'm here today. It was a Friday night in early 2016. I didn't feel well. I felt like an elephant had stepped on my stomach. And I was overwhelmed with this impending sense of doom, which is weird because I was really out of touch with my emotions. I laid in the closet at 3 a.m. so my wife could sleep, and I pulled out my phone and I quickly Googled the words, impending sense of doom, and something crazy happened. Literally every response on Google that day said heart attack, heart attack, heart attack, heart attack. So I tell my wife, honey, I don't feel well. I'm going to take myself to the ER. I just want to get checked up. And I drive myself to the ER, and thankfully the doctors took me seriously. They ran a quick blood test, and they came back in the room, and they said, Mr. Woerner, you are having a heart attack. What? I have been a gymnast my entire life. Why would I have a heart attack? Well, after a series of tests, they determined that I needed an emergency quintuple bypass open heart surgery, for which they harvested an artery from my arm. This scar, the daily reminder that I should have been dead. But thanks to a sleepless night, incredible doctors, and modern medical technology, I'm still here. Well, and like my mom, I'm also a deeply religious person. And the way I view this is like the game of soccer. At the end of the game, the whistle blows. And sometimes the game goes into bonus time. But only the ref knows how long that bonus time is going to last. Like anyone faced with their own mortality, this event spurred me on to refocus. If my God chose to keep me here, surely he must have a plan for me. There's no room for status quo or comfort zones. Every opportunity deserves the best me I can bring. But to what end? The doctors tell me that my genetics make me predisposed to a greatly accelerated heart disease. One doctor even told me I'd be lucky to make it to 60. So I've been asking myself this question. If I only have a few years left to live, what happens to all my experiences, my knowledge, my wisdom when I'm gone? Does it just disappear? Perhaps I should write a book. But I'm not a writer, and only my mom would read it. Maybe. That's why I'm here. Because I've learned that social reluctancy is not a compliment. Because it directly contradicts the notion of legacy. The part of myself that I imprint on the world I leave behind. So I told you about Randy and Bill and Ken. I am part of their legacy. But if I stay in my little comfort bubble, their legacy and subsequently my own legacy will be lost. This may be my last speech. Maybe not. But in being influenced to give a speech, I've realized the value of the influence I already have. I don't need to wait for a podcaster or a writer to help my friends and family be the best versions of themselves that they can be. I need to invest and invest and invest. My hope is that my legacy might be helping a business owner navigate their way to success, or have an employee rethink their priorities and motivations in a healthy way. So instead of waking in the morning dreading their day of work, they're actually excited to go to work. Or perhaps at the end of the day, coming home, instead of being exhausted and demoralized, what if they were encouraged? Imagine the impact that would have on their families at home. That's my goal of a legacy. Shouldn't that be a goal of anyone who carries influence? To improve the condition of those around them? So, to my fellow social reluctants, I'll leave you with this. Look for the places you already have influence. Strive to make that influence a positive thing. And maybe, just maybe, you'll gain the courage to step out a little further. You never know where you might end up. Thank you.